let's start with what already happened, because Tom, Michigan and Illinois, there are a lot to pick apart when it comes to Michigan for us to be concerned about. Blake Corum goes down with an injury. The offense continues to have to settle for field goals instead of getting touchdowns. There's also a little bit of controversy here as it pertains to the officiating and, Brett Bielema's comments after the game. You were live blogging this game. My heart goes out to you that you had to invest so much emotionally and professionally into this. What are our strongest takeaways in terms of Michigan escaping home defeat at the hands of the Fighting Illini?
Michigan is very dependent on Blake Corum.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was the one thing from the game that, like, first play of the game, he breaks free for a 37-yard run. They go 75 yards, 7 plays, score a touchdown. Then they had long drives after that didn't end in points, but like Blake Corum was the focus of the offense still. Like, I mean, he had like a 41-yard screen pass in which about 45 of the yards came after the catch. And once he got hurt, like he left with 100 yards rushing and like 40 yards receiving all in the first half. Once he left the game, Michigan's offense didn't do anything. Like they were already missing Donovan Edwards, who was banged up. So they're down their number 2 back. Corum leaves the game. And it kind of got put on J.J. McCarthy's shoulders. And nobody in the Michigan passing game, as far as tight ends or receivers, was really able to do much of anything. McCarthy was not able to push the ball down the field. Like, if you looked, all of Michigan's explosive passing plays, I did the math. I can't remember exactly what it was, but roughly 80% of the yards on them came after the catch. So it was short throws and big runs afterwards, which is, it's kind of a problem. So they were able to escape, get the win, get the 4 field goals in the second half to come back. Illinois taking the lead. First of all, it's the first time Michigan allowed touchdowns in the third quarter all season. It's the first time they trailed in the fourth quarter all season, but they were able to get some field goal drives, get the lead, get the win. That's really all that matters. The bigger news is if Blake Corum is banged up, and I mean, he came back in the third quarter. He tried to play. He came in for the first series.
He had 1 carry, right?
Yeah. And then you never saw him again, which doesn't bode well. So if he's not able to play next week against Ohio State, based on what I saw today, because, Illinois has a very good defense, just like Ohio State does. Based on what I saw today, I'm very worried if I'm Michigan about next week's game.
No doubt about it. So a couple stats here that to me kind of encapsulate what we saw in the game. Michigan had 1 tackle for loss.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying Illinois drove the ball on them effectively, but Illinois was able to operate without just an insane amount of harassment. And that's not normal. If we go back to the Penn State game, I thought Michigan had a lot more just kind of havoc created in the backfield of Penn State, which has a good offensive line, a couple of future NFL guys on it, than it did against Illinois. So credit to Illinois for blocking Michigan for most of the day. There was definitely kind of an emotional shift too, I felt like, because Michigan's up, 4? They're going down. Did he get the first down on the run that Corum took the shot on, or was it going to be like 2nd and 4?
He had set up a first down in the red zone when he fumbled, yeah.
Okay, so he fumbles, and they really, to Tom's point, they never looked the same after that. And I wonder if it wasn't kind of an emotional thing, like, oh man, like, I know we got to win this game, but that's our horse. If he's out, like, it's a problem. I'm glad he came back in the game, because it tells me it's not something like the McGahee injury, right? Like, and usually, like, but like when you first saw it, right, the low hit below the knee, I think guys of our age think, oh man, that McGahee shot, like, that's, ooh, God. And then he stayed down for a little while too. So there's that. The other thing is, I think I counted like 5 or 6 just bad misfires when J.J. McCarthy was unbothered in the pocket relatively, and like, he cannot seem to hit these crossing routes. Like the Michigan's tight ends are huge, and he's throwing it over their heads consistently. Everything is high. He's not finishing his throws. He's not really snapping it off. And that's a concern, because Michigan State threw it on Illinois a little bit, and Purdue certainly threw it on Illinois in better weather or worse weather than what we got today. Man, McCarthy looked off again, and is this passing offense getting any better? Because I don't see it.
Yeah,
No.
and Illinois was banged up in the secondary. Like they did not have Taz Nicholson. They did not have Tyler Strain, which are two of their top 4 corners. And like they didn't get any sacks. They did a decent job of getting pressure. But like you said, Michigan's defensive line didn't really cause any havoc. And I guess that's why the Illinois offensive line is nominated for the Joe Moore Award. But that was probably their best performance of the day, but it wasn't enough. So yeah, it's like I said, if you're Michigan, you're thrilled you got the win. You're worried about next week. If you're Illinois, like I understand Bielema was upset with the refs. I was upset with the refs at the end of the game, but Illinois also had chances to put this thing away and didn't. They put the refs in a position where some close calls could, cost them the game. And I've seen that situation with this team before. It's like they've had chances to beat good teams like this and they have failed to close. So it's more on them, I think, than the officials.
There is one side of this where, as we continue our conversation about the top teams, we're going to say, look, you got to win. College football is really tough, just figuring out a way to get a win. But at the other side is like, well, we've got these flaws. And when they are JJ McCarthy accuracy issues, when they are Michigan red zone issues, when all that starts to pile up, it's like I came out of week 12 feeling worse about a lot of teams. And so on that note, I want to pivot to Ohio State, because Ohio State was playing with its food for about a half with Maryland, finally was able to hit the gas. But this final score against the Terps is not representative of how close this game was all the way down the stretch, where you had a Maryland offense that was able to score and was able to move the ball on the Ohio State defense, and where you had the need for, shocker. What we had when JTT had his like baller game, I was like, what's your biggest takeaway? It's like recruiting matters. And here we go again. 3 touchdowns from Dallin Hayden. And that's just the mark that was the Buckeyes offense. It wasn't necessarily CJ Stroud moving the ball through the air, though he did have some good passes and some good passing plays. It was Ohio State leaning on the ground game to be able to escape an upset spot. So before we get into any Ohio State, Michigan thoughts, where are we at with the Buckeyes too, after getting in and out of College Park with a victory?
I have one fundamental disagreement here. I don't feel like Ohio State was ever in danger of losing this game.
Ever?
No.
Trailing at halftime.
Yeah, at halftime by 3 points. And then they took the lead early in the third quarter, and they never gave it back. And
I thought Maryland moved the ball well, but had to settle for field goals, which you could argue is like, oh, bend but don't break. Jim Knowles' defense, that's what he learned. That's what we saw from Oklahoma State in the Big 12. I still thought there was enough offensive success that Ohio State could get got later in this game.
Yeah, but like the thing is, Maryland was able to move the ball, but Maryland was never in Ohio State territory in the second half in a 1-score game. Like the only time Maryland was able to score in the second half of that game was when it was down 2 scores. Okay. It moved down the field and scored. So it's like, yes, the scoop and score at the end of the game to make it a 13-point final at the end made it look a lot, more of a quote unquote comfortable win than it was. But at no point while I was watching this game did I actually think Ohio State was going to lose it.
I think that's fair. Maybe I thought a little bit just because they looked off to me somewhat. Stroud, just not one of his better games. But I want to give Maryland's defense some credit here, guys. Like we get a lot of guys chirping at us on Twitter because we don't talk Maryland enough, which I think we just have a couple of really dedicated Maryland fans who also happen to like cover 3, which we appreciate y'all. Maryland can cover. I think I've seen enough of this team to know they can kind of cover people. And honestly, like that was considered a weakness for the squad coming into the season. I know they've had some injuries there. They covered Ohio State pretty well. Like Stroud did not have one of his better games. And, offensively, this is sort of like Maryland offense we were hoping to see for parts of this season. They blocked Ohio State all right. Like Tua's little brother's not that bad. They moved it pretty well, and I just totally blanked on the kid's name because I don't want to mispronounce it. Yeah, excuse me. Man, and yet I do come away worrying more, I think, about Michigan than I do Ohio State, because Ohio State, like we say Stroud looks off. Stroud's off game looks better than McCarthy's A game.
Yes.
And if Michigan doesn't have Corum, Ohio State does have Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yeah. And also, like, Michigan loses its top 2 running backs and really struggles to move the ball. Ohio State loses its top 2 backs, and Dallin Hayden rushes for 146 yards.
Touchdowns all after halftime.
Yeah, but yeah, no, I'm with you, bud. But going back to Maryland, for our Cover 3 fans who do want us to talk more about Maryland, I have a question for you. Are you concerned at all that your 2 best games of the season were Michigan and Ohio State? Like, does it bother you that your team seemed a lot more prepared and ready to play these games than it does most of its other games?
No, for this reason. Because under Mike Locksley, Maryland had traditionally been blown out in these type of games, and then they would play the bully as a favorite. Normally, Maryland kind of lays down to Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan. If you look at it, they don't usually hang. So this year is a real departure from what they normally do.
Okay.
Fair.
Mike Locksley has a sub 500 record, right? Is it in Big Ten play or overall as Maryland's head coach? He's in his 4th season right now. I know he has a sub 500 record in either Big Ten play or overall, but he does have a couple bowl appearances, and they are bowl eligible again. They did not need this in anything other than for pride and for reputation along the way.
At Maryland, if you take away the 2015 stint as the interim, he is 18-22 overall and 9-21 in Big Ten play.
It might be fair to demand more.
Bud's right. Like, in previous years, like, this is a team that has beaten up on the teams it's supposed to beat up on and just gotten destroyed by the East's elite teams. But it's weird to me that this season they have played a bunch of close games against the teams they should beat. They did get blown out by Penn State, but then they came out with what I feel are their best 2 games of the season, better than most of their wins against Ohio State and Michigan.
So as far as like demanding more from Locksley, I just want to wait until they redo the divisions ultimately, because you just have 3 kind of auto losses every year. It's hard to have a winning record when you start out 0-3 every year.